I always knew I was the family's afterthought, but I never thought they'd try to erase me. The day after my graduation, while they were busy celebrating my sister's business launch, I quietly opened a legal trust and moved $3 million of their estate under my name. Just in case, something about their smiles didn't feel real anymore. They always said I was the smart one, but what they really meant was disposable. When I found the hidden clause in the will, my name nowhere to be seen, I knew this wasn't neglect. It was war, and I wasn't going to lose. Not this time. I arrived home the morning after graduation, clutching the rolled-up degree from Stanford Law like it meant something. My mother greeted me at the front door with a brief smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Welcome back," she said, stepping aside so I could roll in my single suitcase. The air smelled like orchids and disinfectant, my childhood in one inhalation. Inside, the house buzzed with preparations. White linen tables, silverware shining, champagne chilling. Jenna was having her launch party. My younger sister, the entrepreneur, was opening her own skincare brand, with full financial backing from our parents, of course. They called it a dual celebration, her business and my graduation. But no one could pretend who the star of the show was. Jenna wore a custom white suit, diamonds glittering around her neck. I stood at the edge of conversations, wine glass in hand, pretending I wasn't invisible. My mother handed me an envelope during dessert. "A little something," she said, tone flat. Inside was a $500 check and a note. "We're proud you made it, Mom." Made it where exactly? Later that night, Jenna cornered me by the kitchen island. "I'm surprised they even let you in the will," she said sweetly, sipping from a crystal flute. "I mean, you do know, right, about the adoption?" Her smile didn't flinch. "Mum and Dad talk when they drink." I stared at her, throat dry. She shrugged and walked away, leaving the sentence burning holes in my chest. I tried to sleep, but my mind kept running laps. I rose quietly, stepped into the hallway, and wandered toward the staircase. Something felt off. The upstairs hallway looked cleaner than usual, like it had been scrubbed for inspection. I turned the corner toward my old room and stopped. On the wall beside the guest bedroom hung a new family portrait. It was huge, framed in gold. My parents sat in matching blue, Jenna standing proudly between them. I wasn't in it. I blinked. Maybe it was just for her launch. Maybe they had meant to surprise me with one of my own. Except no one had taken my picture that day. 2 days later, I sat alone in the study, trying to ground myself. I noticed a partially open drawer in my father's mahogany cabinet. Curiosity, or maybe intuition, pulled me closer. Inside was a leather-bound folder labelled Transfer Agreement JF. My heart thudded. The documents outlined a full asset transfer plan, 3 properties, a significant portion of liquid holdings, and primary business shares, all to Jenna. Dated 6 months ago. My name appeared once, in a footnote indicating no current stake held by EF. I closed the folder slowly. Cold washed over me like a tide. I approached my father that afternoon, folder in hand. "Can we talk?" He barely looked up from his tablet. "Sure." I placed the folder on the table between us. He sighed. "Jenna understands business, Emma. You're more of a thinker, and thinkers don't always make the best stewards." I stared at him. "You gave her everything." "She earned it." The words sliced deeper than I expected. I went to my mother next. She didn't even pretend to be surprised. Don't stir things up, Emma, she said coolly. You're lucky we supported your education at all. You know that wasn't part of the original plan. I blinked. What original plan? Her silence was confirmation. She leaned closer. You keep pushing and you'll lose more than just your pride. That night, I heard the faint clicking of the safe being opened downstairs, the one we always kept backup documents in. I waited until I heard Jenna's footsteps retreat. When I entered the study an hour later, the code had changed. Not subtle, just intentional. I tried the code again the next morning, and again. Wrong, wrong, wrong. I stared at the metal door, trembling. Then I noticed the old keyhole, the backup from when we were kids. I went to my old drawer and retrieved the antique key Dad once gave me. It clicked. I opened the safe slowly, breath shallow, empty. Gone were the family deeds, copies of wills, old letters from Grandpa. Gone were the things that might have mattered. Gone was every piece of proof I might have held. The next morning, I woke to voices echoing from the east wing. Laughter, muffled yet pointed. I tiptoed toward the dining room, careful not to make the wooden floors creak. Through the frosted glass of the double doors, I saw them. My parents, Jenna, and Uncle Ray from Atlanta, seated at the long table. Legal pads, laptops, coffee cups, half drained. It looked like a strategy meeting, not a family breakfast. I turned the knob. Locked. A few hours later, I asked my mother what the meeting was about. She looked up from her gardening gloves and said, without blinking, "Just some estate housekeeping, nothing to trouble you with." I wasn't sure what hurt more, the deliberate exclusion or the blatant lie. That night, over dinner, Jenna raised her glass and said, "To simplifying the future." Her eyes met mine, and for a moment the table went quiet. Then my father laughed, and everyone followed suit. Even the lawyer was surprised how well we structured it, Jenna continued. Said it was almost too airtight. Airtight, I echoed. What exactly are we sealing? My mother placed her fork down. Emma, don't turn everything into a courtroom. Then Uncle Ray chimed in, grinning. Careful, Emma, you're starting to sound like a lawyer. I am a lawyer, I said. Sure, Jenna smirked, but you're kind of the outside one. You know, outside counsel? The laughter was polite, sharp, meant to cut. Later that night, as I made tea in the kitchen, Maria, our longtime housekeeper, walked past and whispered without looking at me. Don't trust her, Jenna. She knows how to make people see what she wants. I turned. What did you say? But she was already gone. I couldn't sleep. My mind was a grid of suspicion and half-finished thoughts. I got out of bed, pulled out my laptop, and opened a spreadsheet. Then another, and another. I stayed up mapping out every asset I knew of. The properties in New Mexico, the joint accounts, the retirement portfolios. Patterns emerged. Transfers, early shifts, asset dissolutions under quiet company names, all leading back to Jenna. I called in a favor from a classmate now working at a forensic accounting firm. 2 hours later, he sent me encrypted documents, shell companies linked to Jenna's name, one of which had purchased a beach house I thought was still under Dad's name. It was already worse than I feared. The next afternoon, Jenna left her phone on the kitchen counter as she FaceTimed someone from her laptop. I was about to head to the backyard when I noticed her screen still lit. A voice message was playing, automatically. She still thinks she has a say, But don't worry, Mum. Emma won't be holding on to anything for long. I stopped cold. The voice was unmistakably hers. I backed out of the kitchen. My hands were shaking. I felt sick, but I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I accessed the old joint account that had once been used for family investments. Its balance was still surprisingly healthy, $3.2 million. Before Jenna could move another inch, I quietly initiated the transfer. All of it into a newly created irrevocable trust under my legal name, with clauses protecting it from any non-beneficiary interference. I knew the risks, but I also knew the law. By noon, the funds were locked, legally untouchable unless someone proved fraud. And I was the only one who knew where the paper trail started. That night, I received a call from an unknown number. The voice was raspy, deliberate. "Miss Foster?" "Yes?" "I was once a close friend of your father's. I practiced law with him before Jenna happened." I sat up straighter. "Who is this?" "I owe him, and I've been watching. I believe there are documents you need to see, documents your father never intended for your mother to find." My heartbeat quickened. "What kind of documents?" "The real will, the one he drafted 6 years ago." Before I could respond, he hung up. The next morning, Jenna made her move. She held a tissue to her nose at breakfast, eyes watery, her voice small. I don't know how to cope with all this pressure. I think I'm having panic attacks. I can't sleep. And knowing my own sister doesn't trust me." My mother pulled her in for a hug. "You don't need to justify anything, sweetheart." My father nodded. "Your health is more important than any inheritance nonsense." I didn't speak, I simply watched. Every tear felt choreographed, every sniff rehearsed. That evening, I tried accessing my personal account for a small grocery run. Declined. I tried again. Then checked my balance, $200. They froze my financial access quietly, fully. The family accountant, a loyal friend of my father, must have switched allegiances. But that night, another email came. Subject, "You deserve the truth." Attached, a scanned PDF. It was real, watermarked, signed, witnessed. My father's original will. And I, Emma Foster, was the sole heir. The news hit like a courtroom verdict delivered with no defence. I was in the kitchen when Jenna stormed in, holding her phone as if it had betrayed her. Behind her, my father looked pale. My mother, cold as polished marble. "You moved the estate into a trust?" Jenna's voice was shrill, trembling with fury. I stayed silent. "You stole it," she shrieked. "Whoa. You stole from this family." My father nodded slowly. "We can't let this stand, Emma." "I followed the law," I said quietly. "We raised you," my mother hissed, "and this is how you repay us?" That evening, a legal summons arrived via courier. I was being sued for misappropriation of family funds. They were taking me to court. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply packed a small bag and left. But the damage wasn't just legal. The betrayal was weaponized, passed around the family like wine. A week later, at a family gathering meant to clear the air, Jenna took the floor. "Emma has always felt like she didn't belong," she said, voice trembling just enough to appear vulnerable. "And maybe that's because deep down she isn't really one of us." The crowd stiffened. My heart stopped. "She's not biologically related to Dad," Jenna said, looking right at me. "We confirmed it last month." A pause, then applause, polite, devastating. Even Uncle Ray clapped. I stood there, frozen. My mother looked away. My father kept his hands folded, as if unsure who I was. I walked out without a word. That night, I lay curled on a stranger's couch, my former roommate's cousin in Queens, the only place I could crash. My phone was filled with texts from unknown numbers, some mocking, some curious, none kind. Only one call came through that I answered. It was Diane, my ex-boyfriend's mother. We hadn't spoken in years. "I saw what they're doing to you," she said. "I always knew you were the only one with a spine in that house." Her voice was the first warmth I'd felt in weeks. But comfort doesn't feed you or house you. The next few days blurred. I stayed in cheap motels, eating dollar meals, scrolling through social media as my name trended in all the wrong places. The family painted me as mentally unstable, vindictive, paranoid. Friends stopped replying, colleagues distanced themselves, even my therapist cancelled a session. One night, soaked from rain, I sat in a dark motel room, clutching the one thing I hadn't let go of, the manila envelope containing the DNA test. I hadn't dared to open it yet, but I did now. Paternal relationship, not consistent. I stared at it. Nothing moved inside me, not grief, not rage, just stillness, the kind that comes right before surrender. I pulled the bottle of sleeping pills from my bag, set a glass of water beside the bed. I wrote a short note, "They win." Then my laptop dinged. Email from unknown sender. Subject: "Before you decide anything." I blinked. Body: "I have the original recording. Your father said you were the only one he ever trusted. Don't let them erase that." Attached audio file. I sat there, frozen, hand hovering over the trackpad. I hit play. The voice was unmistakably my father's, but it was different, tired, raw. "If anything happens, Emma must be protected," he said. "She's the only one who never asked for anything and never played games." Jenna worries me." He paused, exhaled. "Sometimes I wonder if Emma was the only good thing I ever did." I covered my mouth. Tears came, uninvited. I picked up the bottle again, then placed it back down. I didn't sleep. At 3:04 a.m., another email landed. Same sender. Subject: "One more thing." Body: "Play minute 3:15. There's something the world deserves to hear." I stared at the screen, hand trembling. What secret did my father hide in those final moments? I pressed play, holding my breath. "I made mistakes," my father's voice rasped. "Big ones. I fell in love with someone I wasn't supposed to. She gave me a daughter, Emma." Silence. She never wanted money, never asked for anything, and yet she's the only one who took after me. My thinking, my integrity. The rest, I'm not proud of how I raised them. A sigh, then something else, low, barely audible. I wanted to tell her, but her mother asked me not to. She thought it would protect her. I see now, it only made her a target. I stopped the recording. My hands were trembling. That was it. That was the missing piece. They didn't hate me because I failed them. They hated me because I reminded them of who they failed to become. It wasn't rejection. It was projection. They saw in me the version of themselves they abandoned. I didn't cry. I stood up, brushed the dust from my jeans, and pulled out my laptop. The next morning, I called the number on the original will's cover page. A voicemail answered, "You've reached Thomas Hale, retired estate attorney." I left a message. He returned my call an hour later. "I knew one day you might reach out," he said. "Your father prepared everything in case, well, let's just say he wasn't naive about your mother and Jenna." I told him everything about the lawsuit, the media, the recording. He paused. "There's more than one way to win a war, Emma. Are you willing to fight fire with facts?" Yes, I said, but I'm not alone. I messaged Corey, an old law school friend turned private investigator. He picked up instantly. Emma Foster, or should I say, the girl who once made Jenna cry in debate club. She bullied you, I said, and I owe you for standing up to her. What do you need? Everything you can dig up. Financials, communications, digital trails, especially anything with forged signatures. I'll have something in 3 days. 3 days later, we met in a dim coffee shop. He handed me a flash drive. You won't believe what she signed. Back in my room, I opened the files. There it was, a contract transferring property from my father to Jenna, dated after his stroke. But the signature was clean, too clean. I ran it through forensic analysis. Confirmed, forged. Corey grinned. She didn't even bother changing the pen pressure. We had her. That night, I met with a crisis communication expert, Amira Walsh, a woman who'd helped whistleblowers survive media firestorms. She listened to everything, then leaned back. You don't need to scream. You need to whisper the truth in a way that sticks. We crafted a plan. Step 1, control the narrative. Step 2, dismantle the lies, one documented fact at a time. Step 3, let the public choose which sister they believed. Meanwhile, I began reconstructing my identity, legally changing my last name to Carlyle, my mother's maiden name, a fresh start. One not chained to betrayal. Then I started writing. Under a pseudonym, I launched a blog, The Quiet Executor. Each post chronicled one part of the journey. No names, no direct accusations, just facts, observations, pain turned into power. Within a week, it had 300,000 views. Within 2, national blogs picked it up. I wasn't invisible anymore, and that terrified Jenna. She responded exactly as we predicted. Late one night, she published a 3,000-word Facebook post titled, "My sister is not who she pretends to be." She painted me as unstable, manipulative, bitter. Claimed I forged the trust, exploited our dying father, and fantasized revenge. But she made one mistake. She copied her opening paragraph word for word from an anonymous blog post I had planted weeks before, baited specifically to catch her. We had metadata, timestamps, screenshots. I forwarded it to Amira. She called back 5 minutes later, breathless. "We've got her. You ready to go public?" I looked at the screen. "Yes," I said. "Let's burn it down." The courtroom was colder than I expected. Marble floors, polished benches, fluorescent lights, too white to feel human. Jenna sat across from me, wrapped in a blazer too expensive to fit her narrative. Her hair was styled to perfection. Her lips glossed in the shade of innocence. But her eyes were hunting. My attorney leaned in. "We go last. Let her paint herself into the corner." Jenna took the stand first, her voice trembling. "I just wanted to protect our family. Emma, she's not well. She manipulated Dad when he was sick. She moved the money without telling anyone. I tried to stop her, but I was scared." The performance was flawless. There were even tears. My mother cried quietly from the gallery. The judge looked unmoved. Then came cross-examination. Jenna's smile faltered. Questions came fast. Dates, names, account numbers. Her answers began to slip. "I don't recall. I think my father signed that. I was under the impression..." But impressions don't hold in court. Finally, it was my turn. I stood slowly, heart steady, not because I wasn't scared, but because I'd already lost everything once. There's a narrative being presented here I began, of a manipulative sister, a greedy woman who took advantage of a dying father. I don't deny that narrative exists. I just challenge its author. I laid out the timeline: graduation, discovery, exclusion, trust creation. I showed emails, texts, legal statements. Then I played the recording. My father's voice filled the courtroom. Emma's the only one I trust with anything. Jenna just performs. She's good at looking right, sounding right, but she's never held a truth she didn't break. The room froze. Jenna went pale. I let the silence linger. Then I submitted the forensic analysis, proving the signature on the property contract was forged. The judge reviewed it for a full minute, then 2. When he looked up, his eyes were hard. "Forgery," he said, "and perjury." A murmur swept the courtroom. Jenna's attorney whispered frantically. The prosecutor stood and filed immediate charges. Fraud, forgery, obstruction. Jenna stood. I was scared. I didn't mean... The judge banged the gavel. "Enough." But I stood again. "Your Honour," I said, "I'm not asking for prison." Whispers. "I'm asking that she face the world with the truth exposed, that she live with what she did, that her legacy carry her name, not mine, not my father's, hers." The judge studied me. "That's unorthodox." "Justice," I said, "isn't always punishment. Sometimes it's exposure." He nodded. "So ordered." Jenna collapsed into her seat. Outside, the cameras were waiting, microphones shoved in my face, journalists calling my name. For a moment I froze. Then Amira stepped beside me. "Say it, Emma." I faced the crowd. "My name is Emma Carlisle, and I protected what was already mine." The next morning, headlines broke across the country. Heir wins back inheritance after sister's fraud exposed. The quiet executor, how one woman outplayed her entire family. Twitter flooded with support. Hashtags trended. Feminist blogs called me a symbol of silent resistance. Forums dissected my strategy like a masterclass. But the real prize was quieter. The trust was intact. I had full control. Properties, stocks, accounts, all back under my name. I donated the beach house to a domestic abuse shelter. I sold the vacation condo and funded a scholarship in my father's name, the Richard A. Carlisle Grant, for law students who had no family backing. Applications poured in. I watched interviews with the first recipients, young women holding tears as they talked about not having to choose between food and books. I finally slept through a night. 3 weeks later, my mother filed for divorce. I found out from an article. In it, she said, "I should have listened to Emma. I was too busy protecting what I thought was a legacy, when really I was just enabling a lie. I didn't reach out. Some truths didn't need my forgiveness to be true. But then an envelope arrived. No return address. My name written in Jenna's handwriting. Inside was a handwritten letter. "Emma, I don't know if apologies mean anything when they come too late, but I'm sorry, not just for the fraud, for everything, for being the reason Dad couldn't love you publicly, for taking what wasn't mine. You didn't deserve it, but there's something else you should know. I didn't forge that document alone. Someone helped me, someone close. Check the USB. Jenna taped to the inside of the envelope was a black USB drive. I stared at it, heart pounding, hands cold. I sat with the USB drive in my hand for almost an hour, turning it over again and again. It felt heavy, not physically, but with the promise of unravelling more darkness. Another betrayal, another name I might have once trusted. But I didn't want more shadows. I had walked through fire and made it to daylight. I no longer needed proof, I needed peace. That afternoon I drove to the coast, climbed onto a quiet cliff where the wind smelled like salt and freedom, and without ceremony I threw the USB into the sea. I watched the tiny splash disappear under waves, gone. No more courtroom strategies, no more waiting for skeletons to drop. Some truths didn't need to be exposed, some just needed to be released. Weeks passed. I spent most of my days answering letters, hundreds of them, most from women, some from men, many from people like me, raised in homes that looked perfect from the outside and felt like war zones inside. One letter came from a 17-year-old girl in foster care. Emma, I never thought anyone would believe me. But after reading your blog, I filed a report. My adoptive father is under investigation now. I didn't know I could be brave until you showed me how. I cried when I read that. The scholarship fund kept growing. Donations poured in, enough to expand it into a full foundation. Trustworthy Daughters. The name stuck. We awarded grants to women who'd been silenced, overlooked, or disinherited. The kind of women the world rarely noticed until they burned everything down. Then an invitation landed in my inbox. Subject: TED Talk opportunity. From betrayal to balance. They wanted me to speak on a red circle to the world. I said yes, but not before doing one last thing. I bought back my childhood home, not to live in. I had no desire to sleep under that roof again. But I saw its potential, not as a memory, but as a haven. I renovated every inch, repainted every wall. Then I opened its doors. It became the refuge house, a temporary shelter for women kicked out of their homes due to control, abuse, or family betrayal. No questions asked, just a key and a clean bed. The first woman who walked through the door brought nothing but a backpack and a toddler. She looked around the foyer and said, "This place feels like a second chance." I smiled. It is. My book released a month later. I moved it into a trust because they couldn't be trusted. It wasn't a revenge story. It was a survival manual, a love letter to the self I almost lost. It climbed bestseller lists within days. Reviews poured in. Ruthless and healing. Like reading a mirror I didn't know I needed. People shared it. Teachers used it. Therapists quoted it. And I knew finally that I'd built something lasting. At a book signing, a girl no older than 15 stood in line for over an hour. When it was her turn, she placed the copy in front of me, hand trembling. "I've been in 4 foster homes," she said softly, "but your book made me feel like I had a voice." I looked into her eyes. "Never let them silence you," I said. She nodded. "You're the reason I'm still here." There are moments you live for. That was one of mine. I no longer wanted my family's approval. I didn't need their apologies or explanations. I had built my own legacy, brick by brick, word by word. And in the quiet moments when the world stilled, and I remembered the girl who once stood in front of an empty safe, questioning everything, I whispered to her, "You were never crazy. You were always right." And I smiled. I didn't win by destroying them. I won by becoming someone they could never control again. I didn't get revenge, I once told an interviewer. I just stopped believing they ever loved me.